So ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming out this beautiful evening for the 14th annual Stillwater Veterans Memorial Benefit Dinner Cruise on the beautiful St. Croix River. Speaking on behalf of the Stillwater Veterans Memorial Board, we welcome you underway. And for me, a confirmed Navy man, there is no better venue in the St. Croix Valley than one that gets us out on the water, even if my Army and Air Force brothers and sisters experience a little bit of seasickness. Like Jerry Kaiser over there. I want to make sure Jerry takes a seat or he's going to get seasick. So nonetheless, it's great to see such a wonderful turnout in recognition and honor of our assembled veterans. Again this year, our World War II veterans are our special honored guests. If we could, can we show hands of our World War II veterans, both those who might be upstairs and certainly those who are downstairs. If we could show a hand. Raise your hands, please. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your service, certainly what we've called the greatest generation. So we do have a lanyard and a little placard to go around your neck for all our World War II veterans. So if you do not have one of those yet, I saw just about everybody raise their hand on the first deck. I saw them have one of those. But if you don't have one, there's our intention for us to provide you one. In addition, Mrs. Suki Thompson, she'll be around to take your picture if she hasn't already done that, so we can get your picture for our whole cruise. And we put that online so we can kind of honor you and you have a chance to go back and take a look. From our count, there is 26 World War II veterans on board our vessel here today, so thank you much. Also, we'd like to have a show of hands for all other veterans in attendance. So all other veterans, all the other wars, conflicts, and other times, please raise your hands. And thank you all for your service. Please know that we are proud of what all you have done on behalf of our country and for what American veterans have done for countries and peoples around the world in the 240 years since our country's founding. Additionally, we wish to thank all of you for support of veterans issues and specifically for support of our Stillwater Veterans Memorial. We would not be on the river here today, nor would the Stillwater Veterans Memorial exist were it not for the support of every one of you. We are particularly thankful for the ongoing, ever-increasing support you've provided over the years through attendance at our events, as well as financial help with the memorial. Due to that investment you've given to us of your participation and donations, we've invested back into the memorial this year alone all new LED lighting at the memorial, as well as we replaced scores of shrubs, installed a couple dozen new grasses, and we continue to work with the city of Stillwater to make a few other changes and have more areas that we'll invest in next year. Now that said, before we get too far into the program, I'd like to express the Stillwater Veterans Memorial Board's sincere special thanks to our host, Dick Anderson of St. Croix Boat and Packet, and for our skipper tonight, Captain Danny Trudeau, and for the Avalon's able-bodied crew who got us all safely on board, will shortly serve us a delicious meal, and then they'll return us safely to shore in a couple hours. So thank you all for them. So as I said, our fair city's memorial relies upon your yearly attendance here and Dick Anderson's great generosity to sustain, update, and expand the site. And for that, we, the board, are profoundly grateful. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't make a specific mention of who's out here with us today at the head table, as well as a special guest in the audience. So our guest speaker tonight is retired U.S. Army Special Forces officer, author, and current resident of Iron River, Wisconsin, Major John Plaster and his wife Gail, so thank you. And on my right side is Major General Larry Shelito. He's the former Adjutant General of the Minnesota National Guard and current Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs, and his wife Yvonne. So thank you, General and Yvonne. You're going to hear from them after dinner, but you'll also hear shortly from fellow board member Chaplain Chris Lanier, and later from John Kramer and Court Moline. In the audience here tonight, I saw them over here, I think a few minutes ago, but they're out and about. we have Minnesota State House of Representative Bob Detmer, an Army veteran, and there's Bob and Colleen, wife Colleen. So Bob fought very hard for the last 11 years to, while working with the governor and the other folks, in order to, the governor just passed legislation that places the retired veterans retired pay as a tax, not tax deductible, tax-free. Tax-free. So that took Bob 11 years in order to make happen. So thank you, Bob, for that hard work. Of course, Bob didn't do it alone. He had some help. Some help he did receive was also from Minnesota State House of Representative Kathy Lomer. Kathy is out here today. Kathy's a Blue Star mother with a son who served in the Army. So thank you, Kathy. And we have Minnesota State Senator Karen Housley also out here too. There's Karen. Thanks, Karen. Ryan Careful was supposed to be here, our very own Washington County Veteran Service Officer. Ryan, are you here? Did you make it out? He's here. Okay, so Ryan, he may be up in the second deck. So there's Ryan. So please, if you want to talk business, Ryan's out here to talk business too, as one of our Veteran Service Officer. So thanks, Ryan. Colonel Neil Hetherington's out here. He's from the U.S. Army. He's a retired guy, but he represents the General Colin Powell Leadership Academy in Minneapolis. So thanks for coming out here, Colonel Hetherington. And the last bit of folks I want to identify is from the Minnesota chapter of the Vietnam Helicopter Pilot Association. We've got 20-plus members in attendance here today. And we also have members of the 2016 Medal of Honor Convention Committee. That annual Medal of Honor event will be taking place in October, mid-October, here in the great state of Minnesota, out at the Capitol. So, so stand by and watch some announcements in the state, in the local papers. But Chief of Staff Tiffany Kowaleski is out here supporting that as well. So thank you all for attending. But perhaps more importantly of all those folks are those 26 World War II veterans who are underway with us that we previously identified. And as we honor those folks from the greatest generation, again this year, I ask that each one of us take a chance or take a moment to see where there's some commonalities in our experiences in some way, maybe commonalities that tie us together across decades, across generations, across the country, and from that, so we can help perpetuate the warrior spirit that this nation was founded upon, and that we certainly still rely upon to serve and thrive in this world today. In support, we've compiled a short biography on each of these good folks, and we placed them in your program so that you can review and perhaps approach one or more of those World War II veterans who've got the lanyards and engage them in conversation. So one such connection I discovered last week in preparation for this event is between Boutwell's Landing resident, Colonel Bob Rupp, and myself. So let me tell you Bob's story. And Bob, I know you are down here, so you can see Bob. There's Bob. So thanks, Bob. So let me tell you Bob's story. During World War II, he was a captain in Service Battery Company, 3rd Armored Field Artillery Battalion, Combat Command A, 9th Armored Division. His unit was stationed on the line northeast of Luxembourg City, Luxembourg, when the enemy started a nearly month-long attack the morning of December 16th, 1944. His troopers held that position for 10 days, firing over 26,000 rounds of 105mm shells into enemy approach areas, an average of 1 round every 40 seconds. His battery job was to supply the ammo. They did that by offloading all but the kitchen truck, formed 2 trains, put drivers in the front, put a loading crew in the back, and they drove night and day, about 120 to 150 mile round trips. His executive officer led one train, and he led the other. And while he can't remember if he ever got out of that Jeep for a week during that 10 days, he does remember that the 3rd Armored Field Artillery was never without ammunition then or any other time during World War II, something to be proud of. And as a result, Combat Company A received a Presidential Unit Citation for holding what became the south shoulder of what we all know today as the Battle of the Bulge. So, and Bob was there. So thank you, Bob, for your service there. And we have 25 more other stories just like that that we'd like you to engage our World War II veterans and hear their story. So Bob himself, he stayed in active reserve after separation, retired as a colonel after 37 years of military service, and even as recent as this year, Bob was active in the military officers, or Minnesota chapter of the Military Officers Association of America, where both he and I are lifetime members. And that said, the connection I'm referring to is that just over 2 weeks ago, my wife and I were visiting my son, who happens to be an Air Force Security Forces officer. My son is now stationed in Northwest Germany, the same country that Bob was fighting some 70 years earlier, that my son now helps defend under the NATO umbrella. Now, that's not ironic, I'm not sure what is, but I think that's what we're seeing these days. And during that visit, just 16 days ago, we stayed at Luxembourg City and visited nearby Bastogne, Belgium, and the areas in between that then Captain Rupp defended. And a local cemetery there, over 5,000 Americans are still interred. We saw a 1959 quote from President Eisenhower, and it's etched in the granite pavement, and it says as follows: "All who shall hereafter live in freedom will be here reminded that to these men and their comrades we owe a debt to be paid with grateful remembrance of their sacrifice and with a high resolve that the cause for which they died shall live eternally." Colonel Rupp, I'm indeed reminded that the cause of liberty is indeed worth fighting for, and despite too many cases, is also worth dying for. We remember you and your comrades from that fateful war, the 26 who are underway with us today, for those living and here with us today, as well as those who are deceased. Further, for all of us, what ties us together in this river cruise is our shared experiences, even though separated perhaps by a few decades, whether in conflict or in peace, whether Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, and Merchant Marines. That's the veteran experience that draws us to battlefields across continents and across time, and that draws us here today. Ladies and gentlemen, I now invite Chaplain Chris Lanier to the podium to provide our invocation and our fallen comrades' toast. Chaplain?
Thank you, Dave. Let us pray. Gracious God, we give thanks for military men and women, both from the past and present, and for their courageous service and sacrifice to our country and its people to secure the blessings of life, liberty, justice, freedom for all. May this gathering be a timely reminder that our freedom was purchased at a high cost and should not be taken for granted. Grant us grateful hearts and a united will to honor the men and women who fought for freedom, who have borne suffering of mind or body, who have brought their best gifts in time of need, who have entered into danger, endured separation from those they love, and who have laid down their lives for others. Bless this time of food and fellowship. Bless each of the veterans here with your steadfast mercy and enduring love. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand if you are able and direct your attention to the small table in front of me in the center of the room for our fallen comrade toast. We dedicate this toast to our fallen heroes from all wars as our most honored guests. You are not forgotten, though you are unable to be visibly here with us tonight. Whenever we gather, we will leave a place for you. Your tablecloth is white, symbolic of your willing response to your country's call to arms. The single rose reminds us of the families and loved ones forever left behind. The red ribbon bears witness to the continuing tragedy of our POWs and MIAs. We are unceasingly demand a proper accounting for those of you still missing and unaccounted for. There is a slice of lemon there on the plate, keeping us mindful of your bitter fate. There is salt there too, symbolic of a river of tears shed by families and loved ones. Your glass is inverted, because you are not here to toast with us tonight. Your chair is empty because you are not here to sit with us tonight. Our gathering is incomplete because you are not here with us tonight. You were there for us. We are still here for you. In honoring each of you, all of you, we stand silently and face the table of honor. Your table. We stand silently in your absence. Ladies and gentlemen, I now ask that if you have a glass in front of you, please raise your glass and toast our honored comrades.
We're about to introduce our speaker for the evening. We are honored to have as our speaker tonight, Vietnam Special Forces Green Beret soldier and author John Plaster, accompanied by his friend and Vietnam veteran, Major General Larry Shalato, Minnesota's Commissioner of Veterans Affairs. Colonel Buzz Kriesel, another Vietnam veteran and friend, sends his regrets at not being able to attend and participate here tonight. General Shalato will have some personal reflections and remembrances in introducing Major Plaster after I first provide some background on John and an overview of the study and observation group he served in. John is from Northeast Minneapolis, entered the Army after high school, and became a Special Forces Green Beret, serving 3 tours in Vietnam from 1968 to 1970. He was a weapons specialist and as a staff sergeant commanded missions in enemy territory and later on provided communications and directed air assets for ground units in contact with the enemy needing to be extracted. SOG carried out the direct orders of the Pentagon's Joint Chiefs of Staff and also the White House. Because SOG operated where public and official U.S. policy stated they were not to be, they carried no identification, dressed out of uniform, and were provided weapons that couldn't be traced back to the United States. Of particular interest to our World War II veterans here tonight, the SOG unit in which John served in Vietnam had its genesis with the OSS operatives of World War II and was commanded by veteran World War II OSS officers in Vietnam. The SOG units were comprised of 3 to 4 Special Forces soldiers and usually a like number of highly trained indigenous mountain yard tribesmen. The units were sent out on missions usually planned for days or until seen and pursued by the enemy. Their objectives were to observe and report back concentrations of enemy men and material, kidnap enemy soldiers, and sabotage supplies and ammunition, and in general create mayhem behind enemy lines. Because of the jungle conditions, the units were helicoptered into landing zones or clearings wherever found in the relative vicinity of the mission objectives in Laos and Cambodia. Because of the concentration of enemy in those areas, the SOG units were often spotted on landing and pursued relentlessly day and night by large numbers of the enemy. The SOG units survived by their wits, their superb physical and tactical training, discipline, and weapons skills. They lived and died by the credo of never leaving a fellow soldier behind. Weather conditions, communication failures, sheer numbers, and the firepower of the enemy resulted in units being overrun. Tragically, entire teams disappeared or were overrun and annihilated. The MIA, KIA, and casualty rates of the SOG units were extraordinarily high. So too was the valor of the Study and Observation Group unit, whose soldiers were awarded 10 Medals of Honor, soon to be 11, more than any other unit of any size in all of American history. Our speaker, the author of 7 books, has written 2 books on the Study and Observation Group, preserving the history of the long classified exploits of the great American heroes with whom he served. At this time, I would like to turn over the introduction of Major John Plaster to General Larry Shillito.
Well, first of all, thank you for being here. John, it's good to see you again. You've done well. As we look for tonight in visiting with John, I first met John back in about 1978. In 78, I was with well, first of all, I'll go back even further. As a Vietnam veteran myself and so forth, coming back to the States, or affectionately referred to as the world, it was at best difficult. And with that, all of a sudden you found people that you could gravitate to, that you could talk to, and they would understand and be non-judgmental. For me, I met my lovely bride at the time, and across the hall from her apartment was a Vietnam vet. And then we would sit down and talk and share, so that helped ease some of the pain. He happened to be in the National Guard at the time, so he signed me up, and I chose to go to work for him. And it was through the National Guard that I met John Plaster. The 2 of the 136 out of Moorhead was a round-out unit. It was a unit that was assigned should the big Russian horde come across the line, that we would be married up with the 1st Infantry Division. Therefore, we were the 2nd unit in the history of the National Training Center as a reserve component to go. A week before we were set to leave, I was the 3 or operations individual, and the intelligence person was a banker, and he finally made the decision that he just couldn't go, which meant he gave up his commission, he got out of the Guard, and we had to find someone to take his place. So at Fargo, North Dakota, I get on the plane, I walk to my seat, and there's a gentleman sitting there. And that was John Plaster, and the rest is kind of history. John and I worked together for 3 weeks in some of the most intensive training the military could get on a peacetime environment. John and I chit-chat back and forth a little bit, and then I'll never forget, he reached in his briefcase at the time and pulled out a North Korean newspaper and started reading it. That's a story he can tell you. But that's his background, that's his diversity, and he is truly an outstanding American. He has written many, many books. I would go into the Army bases and look at the shelves, and his book still, I think, is a mandatory reading. The Ultimate Sniper, for sure. And in the SOG, he identifies many, many different stories, to include a personal friend that he highlights in one of the chapters. But also, he has an interesting story I asked him to tell you about, in the significance of a parent's gift to him in form of a foghorn. So with great pleasure, honor, and pride that I introduce Major John Plaster.
I don't hug very many generals. After an introduction like that, I guess I'm obligated to be interesting and hold your attention. Well, I'd like to add a little bit to what SOG was. The Studies and Observations Group, that was what it was known as, but it was actually, that was just a cover name. It was actually the Secret Operations Group. In 1964, it was created to take over all the covert operations in Southeast Asia from the CIA. The war had grown to such a point. It's still a year before any American combat troops had landed. But the war had grown to such a point that the CIA could no longer manage it. It had become a military war. It created a kind of a crazy situation in the summer of 1964. One of the assets we in SOG took from the CIA was a maritime unit. You already mentioned that OSS, where some of our early commanders were old OSS vets from World War II. Well, they organized SOG the same way the OSS, that's what they knew to do. So they organized the same way. And one element was called the Maritime Group, just like OSS in World War II. Their job was to run teams, Vietnamese teams, out of the coast of North Vietnam. In order to do this, the CIA had acquired from Norway about a dozen. They were nasty class, that's what they were called. The boats weren't nasty, but they were the fastest PT boats in the world. They were like cigarette boats, they called them, for running drugs. Well, the CIA already had Vietnamese that they'd been using for infiltrating into North Vietnam with Vietnamese kinds of boats, but the Vietnamese could not handle those high-speed boats. They were difficult to handle. So the CIA had to look to Europe to find instructors for them. They went, well, where did the boats come from? They came from Norway. So they recruited some Norwegians to come to Vietnam and instruct these Vietnamese, as weird as that sounds. Well, all of a sudden, Secretary of Defense Robert Strange McNamara required, excuse me if I emphasize the strange, but Robert Strange McNamara insisted that they begin raids in North Vietnam. Well, they weren't ready. The Vietnamese could not handle the boats. I mean, they were not accustomed to these very high-speed, fastest small boats in the world. Well, pressure kept coming, and when the CIA does something, or in covert ops, under those conditions where you don't want any American involvement, you use what they call third country nationals. They aren't Americans, maybe they aren't the target you're going after, but you'll find somebody from another country to do this so that there's plausible denial. Well, they keep getting pressure from McNamara. So lo and behold, they put those Norwegians at the helm of those high-speed nasty boats to run raids into North Vietnam. And in one of those raids, in August, I think it was August 6th of 1964, they attacked some North Vietnamese radar sites. And when they took off, the boats took off, the North Vietnamese sent a whole bunch of PT boats after them. They did not find the SOG boats, but they did find the U.S. destroyer Turner Joy. They fired torpedoes at the Turner Joy. The U.S. started bombing North Vietnam, and thus it could be said the Norwegians started the Vietnam War. That is an honest-to-God true story. The only thing is a couple of them were Germans as well, because Germany was the only other country in the world using the nasty class boats. So you now know, if somebody wants to point the finger, point it at Oslo. Those years when I was in SOG, I had 3 tours, 3 years, all of it in combat. Why? Because I loved the men that I was with, and I wasn't one of the new breed. They were comrades. They were the best friends you could ever have. Guys that would risk their lives and actually give them to help each other. Where the heck was I going with that? Anyway, what we were doing was extremely dangerous. We were operating in small teams, 6 to 8 men, 2 to 4 American Special Forces, and the rest were what we called indigenous. They were most often Montagnard tribesmen that we trained ourselves. They could be Vietnamese, including former North Vietnamese, or they could be Chinese, or they could be Cambodians. When we take in these small teams deep behind enemy lines into Laos and Cambodia, For you GIs who fought in Vietnam, you probably never heard of SOG. And that's right, that's good, because everything that SOG did was classified top secret, and you shouldn't have known about it. However, I want to give you some insights into what it was like behind enemy lines in Laos. The North Vietnamese had 10,000 trucks in Laos in order to move supplies. They had 2,500 miles of roads that they moved those supplies through. Eventually, because SOG kept raiding them and kicking their butts, whenever their pants were down, we tried to sneak in and kick their butts. They kept adding layer upon layer upon layer of security until later in the war, like by '69, they actually had 50,000 North Vietnamese troops dedicated to securing their supply lines. And by then, they also had tracker dogs. Some GIs in Vietnam, you probably heard, there were barking deer that would bark at night and so on. These were not barking deer. These were dogs that would track with you. They'd have them on a leash and they'd come after you. I remember the first time that I heard a barking dog behind us, my reaction was, damn, the dogs are on their side. It was a childish thing, but you just, as an American growing up, and dogs are your friends, and all of a sudden they're trying to hunt you down and kill you. Which it wasn't as big a threat as it would first seem, because their dogs were not trained bloodhounds. They could follow a scent, but we could ambush them. Some of the old tricks of going in water, you could help lose a scent. Or we also had little containers of tear gas powder that we could spray behind. A real bloodhound, first time it caught a whiff of that, would back away. A handler would know to go around the area. But these dogs, yeah, they were not that well trained. However, during World War II, the Brits developed a really clever counter to tracker dogs. They took dried blood and ground it up and mixed it with cocaine powder so that the German dogs would smell it. They'd want to sniff that blood more and more, and then it would numb their olfactory nerves. But SOG would not give us cocaine. I know, Larry, there are terrible things that happen in war. For me, those are the best of years, and they were also the worst of years. General Shelto asked that I relay one story. This is an honest-to-God true story. Whenever we made contact with the enemy, we executed what we called an immediate action drill. That is, it's kind of like a special team. I dread to say, on the Vikings, go Green Bay. Oh. But okay, the Vikings are all right. I grew up in Minnesota. But nevertheless, it's like a special team where these are carefully rehearsed, and it's time. You're going to put out a whole bunch of firepower, throw grenades, drop tear gas, whatever, in your reaction to the North Vietnamese. Well, I remember reading during the Korean War that for psychological reasons, the Chinese sometimes blew bugles at night for psychological effect. Because American GIs would be up there, it's all dark, you hear all these bugles, and it seems like all the hordes in the world are about to descend on you. So I thought, wow, wouldn't it really be cool if, because one of the Americans on my team had played the trumpet in high school. So I said, if I get my hands on a bugle, how would you like to blow that during an immediate action drill? Well, the problem was he couldn't be counted upon to pucker up in the middle of a gunfight. So I scratched my head for a while. I thought, wait a second. I sent a letter home to my dad in Minneapolis. I don't know if any of you remember Northeast Minneapolis. There was a sporting goods shop down on East Hennepin called Henne's, that had boats and sporting goods. I asked him to go down to Henne's and buy me an air horn. You know, like, I thought back when in high school we'd have somebody, compressed gas, a little Freon gas, whatever it was, and have a little horn, and you go, push it, make a lot of noise. I thought psychologically that could give us an edge. So my dad, bless him, he sent me one, and I assembled it, spray painted it black to camouflage it, and I left it on the shelf in my team room for a while. And then we're getting ready to go on an Operation Cambodia. I put on my gear and I thought, wait a second, there's that air horn. So I attached it to my LBE, the gear that you wear, taped it on there, went into Cambodia. We were looking for a suspected North Vietnamese tank park. That is where they had tanks hidden in the jungle. Where we inserted, it was like 6 kilometers north, but that jungle was really thick. We're climbing up to a ridge line, and lo and behold, there was a trail up there. It didn't look like it was very heavily used, so I said, geez, we'd save a lot of time if we just follow this trail. I then violated one of our basic rules. If you ever get on a trail, walk it for a distance, get off, and never go back. Because that way you cannot be ambushed if anybody saw you, heard you, and so on. Well, I violated. That trail was so good, we took a break, took off almost to the top of this ridge line, and we were in a little saddle. We were kind of here, and then it dropped down, and then went up again. And we're just going along, and dot, 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 dot. A couple of machine guns open up, fire an RPG over us. Fortunately, they were just a little bit uphill from us, and they were shooting over the top of us. Well, we immediately went into an immediate action drill, shooting like crazy, but if we tried to run directly backwards, we'd be going uphill right into where they were shooting. Well, it's a little bit of confusion for a moment because I had the guys halt, and I had been emphasizing to my Montagnards. My Montagnards had a limited understanding of a lot of subjects. They had never received any kind of formal schooling in their lives. They could not think beyond an arithmetic value of 10 because that was their fingers. So you had to train them a lot, and it became repetitious. Well, I wanted them to start throwing hand grenades. America has the best hand grenades in the world. So I introduced them to Mr. Hand Grenade. Mr. Hand Grenade is your friend. Your friend wants to help you in the middle of a gunfight. I kept drilling into them, you've got to start using grenades. So normally when we're in that gunfight, normally I just drop a magazine and slam another one in and shoot again, and I slammed a second one in, I looked down, this would be a good situation for a hand grenade. But instead of seeing a hand grenade, I saw the air horn. Meanwhile, all these North Vietnamese fires, this is a very short period of time, 30 seconds from when it started, all this fire, and now they're shooting from another direction. So I pushed down on that air horn. And you know the way it finally, no matter how hard you push, it's done? And when I stopped, you could have dropped a pin and heard it hit the floor. That is the honest to God truth. And we then got up, ran the hell down the other side, just right over the side of the ridge and got away. Not a man wounded. And then got it. Thank you, helicopter pilots upstairs, and the helicopters came in and got us. We got out of there. Well, I was written up for a medal for that, an Army Commendation Medal. And I'm really disappointed because the original draft commended my improvisation and my willingness to risk my life to fight the enemy with a mere air horn. I swear to God this is true. But they sent it down to Nha Trang, which is where the 5th Special Forces headquarters is, and somebody there said, we cannot put that in a war. So they rewrote it, and it was the typical jargon of quickly reorganizing his troops to face the enemy, yada, 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 yada. So what could have really been a cool commendation became just another commendation. I already mentioned having been among a bunch of really, really fine soldiers, but it wasn't just Special Forces or just SOG. Americans don't realize, because of all the terrible, terrible biased coverage of the war, how totally giving and supporting American soldiers were toward each other, even toward strangers in that war. During my 3rd tour, I flew with the Air Force. I was a backseater in what was called an OV-10, forward air control aircraft, which it was an armed fact. That is, we normally would have been flying in and putting rockets in to mark targets for fighters to bomb or strafe. But we also had a couple pods of high explosive rockets on board, which was nice to buy a little bit of time for a team on the ground, make the enemy maybe break a contact or keep them busy while a team escaped. Well, on this particular day, as we were briefing before we took off, the intel was in, the alert was in that an RF-4, that is an F-4 Phantom, but a reconnaissance version that takes photographs, that it was missing, presumably in Laos. Its call sign I'll remember for the rest of my life. Stormy 03 was missing. And everybody, all aircraft, be on the alert, try to listen for their emergency transponder, etc. We did not have anybody on the ground in Laos right then. Weather was bad, really bad, so we weren't going to insert anyone. The pilot and I decided, let's go exploring. We got all of Southeast Asia, we got a full tank of gas, let's see what the heck is out there. So we started flying the Vietnam border. And we're going to head all the way up to Khe Sanh, which is at the very northwest corner of South Vietnam. And we were almost all the way up there, and all of a sudden you hear that beep, beep of an emergency radio going off. So I came up on, it's called guard, that is the emergency frequency. I came up on guard, talking to these guys, and we could tell instantly it was not Stormy 03, unfortunately, but it was one of our own SOG teams out there in the middle of nowhere, and they were running for their lives. They'd already taken some wounded, and including the team leader, the staff sergeant, fellow staff sergeant, and he had been hit with 2 AK rounds. They were running for their lives. Well, just because we were talking to them on guard, any other aircraft anywhere in Southeast Asia could hear us, 243 megahertz, because they all have that same kind of emergency radio in the aircraft, just in case. Well, we were firing for them, trying to get some aircraft launched. We couldn't find anybody. Lo and behold, a passing group of Huey helicopters, to this day, I don't know who they were, heard us on guard. And I forget our call sign, it was like Covey 27. Covey 27, this is Echo Flight 99. We've got 5 slicks here. Could we be of help? Why not? It was a total improvisation. Next thing you know, there was a couple Cobra gunships. This is the honest to God truth. A couple Cobra gunships came up on guard. Initially, they thought it was Stormy 03 because everyone was listening for Stormy 03. Well, they came up on guard and said, hey, you need a little fire support? And there was no coordination. There was no authority beyond a voice on a radio. And they flew directly out there immediately. Between those Cobras and the Hueys, we pulled those guys out. We got them all out. To this day, I do not have any, they flew those guys back to an airstrip inside South Vietnam, dropped them off, and flew away. It was like the Lone Ranger disappearing into the western sun. Well, there's a little thing to add to that story. That team leader who had taken 2 AK hits, Eldon Bargewell, was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, second in the Medal of Honor for that operation. Eldon got out of the Army, he recovered, got out of the Army, went to college, took ROTC, received a commission in the Army, went back because of his Special Forces background. He eventually ended up in Delta Force. He was the Delta Force commander in Mogadishu, Somalia. If you saw that, the movie, Black Hawk Down, he was the commander of Delta Force there. He went on to make 2 stars during the War on Terror. He retired as a 2-star general. And it all started because there were some voices on a radio. To me, that story exemplifies as no other the readiness of fellow Americans. It didn't take somebody waiting for an order, waiting for authority. They just did it. And they risked their lives when they did for total strangers from a unit they didn't know. They didn't even know what the unit was. So I want to end this by saying I think just about all our troops in Vietnam were that way. I think all of our troops are that way today. I've been very fortunate in the last few years. I've helped train some troops in the 101st Airborne and the 3rd Armored Cav. I'm very proud of them. I hate to say it, they're better trained than a lot of us were back then because they're pros. But I'm very proud of them. I'm very proud to have served. I'm very proud of America, and I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. God bless you.
Just one closing comment. Major Plaster is rather humble in his self-praise. I should mention to you that in 2004, the U.S. Air Force Air Commando Association inducted him into their Hall of Fame, the first Army veteran ever so honored. 2 years later, he was inducted into the U.S. Army Special Forces Hall of Fame at Fort Bragg. Only the 22nd Green Beret to receive this distinction. Those are a few of the accolades that have been presented to Major Plaster, and wanted to make sure that you were aware of those additional distinctions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Major Plaster. That was pretty exciting, especially the most exciting was the sound effects. So, woke everybody up. Yeah, woke everybody up. So I'd like to bring up next is Court Moline. Court is our president of or chairman of our board, and he's going to talk about not only our expansion, a little about that, but for all those who are waiting with bated breath, did you win the silent auction? Court has those results.
Hi, everybody. So I'm going to start off first by announcing the auction winners. I'll just announce your names. You'll have to come over and see what you won. And I guess first I should start by thanking our auction donors. We had about $3,500 worth of things donated this year for our silent auction. Those included donations from Herberger's, the Stillwater Veterinary Clinic, Stillwater Liquor, Just For Me Spa, some of our committee members, Dave Rattay, the Lumberyard Pub in Afton, Gondola Romantica in Stillwater, the St. Paul Saints, Callaloo Spa, Amit's Hot Air Balloon Rides, and U.S. Bank. So thanks to our donors. We really appreciate the donations. All right, who won those items? And we had a lot of great items this year. Alphabetically, Ray Anderson, Ben Brown, Bruce Dudding, Michael Gerster, Neil Hetherington, Sue Horning, Jack Holt, John Holt, Elijah Mack, Savannah Mack, Carrie Moline, my better half, Jody Nelson, and Colleen Rice. Thanks for your bids, everybody. Stop by our booth back here to pick up your items and pay for your items. And you might be wondering, what does all of those donated funds go to? We've got a few things going on. If you've been by the memorial site recently, you'll notice that we've had some upgrades in our lighting. We improved, had some issues with our lighting, but upgraded them to include LED lights. They look great. We're going to continue with that expansion until we've refitted the whole site with LEDs. So it's very nice, prominent. If you haven't seen them, stop by, check them out. They look great. Another thing that we're working on right now is our expansion. Right now, the memorial site has about 1,400 places for pavers, the pavers where veterans have their names engraved, and it's almost full. We've got 380-ish engraved pavers there, so not many blanks, and we need to do something about that. The community's just been great in donating those pavers, identifying veterans that should have pavers there, and we'd like to keep that going forward. So we've created a plan to add an additional 500 pavers to the site. Beyond that, this expansion will make the site more of a memorial. If you can picture the site in your heads, around the center of the site, kind of looking at the spire, our expansion is going to include a widening of that main area. And so we'll have 3 walkways, 3 sidewalks, if you will, that'll go north and south, and that's where all of the pavers will be. It should make the site just a better sense of being a memorial, and we're looking forward to getting that started. But all of the funds we raise tonight will go towards things like that, improving our lighting, keeping the memorial very nice, and expanding it as needed. And that's all I got. Thanks everybody for coming to the cruise tonight. We appreciate your support and we appreciate your donations. Thank you.
So I'll close out with some final words. Our skipper Danny Trudeau, he's been kind of paying attention where we are in this program. So if you notice, he's kind of circling around a bunch of different places. So we get our final remarks in. And the bottom line is, thank you all for coming, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, there's one great opportunity that I want to make sure you're aware of. And while it applies to all veterans, we're really focusing on World War II veterans right now, and we've got a waiting list of Korean War veterans. And what is that opportunity? Well, we have on board here today a gentleman named Jerry Kaiser. Jerry's going to stand here, and he's a guy with a red hat and a pretty cool Hawaiian shirt, okay? And so if you're a World War II veteran, think about, if you haven't already talked to Jerry, think about contacting Jerry, because Jerry is the guy who puts on what's called honor flights in Minnesota. And honor flights is an opportunity for about, I think it's 80 to 90 veterans, and really is it veterans, I know it's veterans plus or companion, but is 80, 90 veterans or veterans and companions?
No, 162 people.
162. So it's about 80 to 90 veterans and their associated companions, so for about 160 total. Jerry takes out twice a year in April and October to Washington, D.C. And it's a great opportunity for you to reconnect with not only a bunch of other vets, but also to see what's going on in D.C. And we go to the World War II Memorial, go to Korean War, go to, I presume, also Arlington as well, and a couple other places. As a commanding officer at RTC unit, I've had my midshipmen as well as other midshipmen go, and we wait for the vets to come off the planes to kind of honor them, hence honor flight. We honor them and their service. There's the 26 here that we invite you. Jerry's inviting you to get underway with them on that flight. And you get kind of first come on that list. He also has room for Korean War veterans, but really has room on a waiting list at this point because he's got a lot of Korean War veterans who'd like to go too. But if you're a Korean War veteran, please let Jerry know too. He'll get you on that list. You're going to probably have to live about 4 or 5 more years before you can get up there. But bottom line is Jerry Kaiser, honor flight, Minnesota. He'll take you out there. He'll and show you a good time. And Jerry, thank you for doing that. You're a great American. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for being here this evening. We trust you found the food delicious, the company charming, and hopefully, including with some sound effects, the program entertaining. Again, we deeply thank the St. Croix Boat and Packet for what they do for us to help us put on this event. And so the resources that your contributions that got out here, we can then turn that around and help beautify our memorial. Thank you for that, and thank you for St. Croix Boat and Packet. We also want to thank Johnny's TV for providing audiovisual support, and for Valley Access for being here. Again, 2 of our partners in all of our activities, Johnny's TV and Valley Access, are always with us, so thank you for that, guys. And then M&D Harmony Quartet for singing for us. Hopefully you found them entertaining as well. Good folks for us. And then lastly, the board members who helped put on this event. It went on, Dan Michaelis, Michaelis, and Chris Lanier, and a bunch of other folks really did a lot of effort to put this on. Thank you for that. Next up for the Stillwater Vets Memorial is our annual Veterans Day ceremony. It's on Friday this year, November 11th. We start at 11:30 up on the hill by the next to the old courthouse. At 11 o'clock downtown is another event that we invite you to as well. So there's an event downtown independent of what we do, but there's an event downtown to honor our veterans at 11, and then come on uptown 11:30 for a formal program that'll take about an hour. And all are welcome to attend both events. In the meantime, I bid you safe travels home tonight, a pleasant tomorrow. Good day.